Welcome back, everyone. I appreciate you being here. Leaders, HR professionals, strategic thinkers, to the MISHRM podcast. Again, I'm your host, Greg Coyne, with Sandler by Jerry Weinberg and Associates. And today I have a very special guest. I have Jennifer DuPont. She is the HR director. She deals with strategic projects, and I would say business planning and thinking strategically over at Kelly Services. So Jennifer, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you having me today.
Hey, you're very welcome. And I'll just jump in right away. We had some really good talks prior to jumping on here, so I want to keep that going. The first thing I want to discuss is I've been asking a lot of our guests, we've got the MISHRM conference coming up here in October. And this year's it's entitled Untangle Your Inspiration. So I want to hear your response. What's that mean for you?
I think it's a great title for this year, and I'm really excited for the conference. For me, there's so much inspiration around, in your day to day. But when you are an HR leader and you go to a conference like MySherm, it is just overwhelming with the amount of information and inspiration that you're taking out of it. So, for those of you that have been in the past, or if you haven't joined yet, hoping you will this year because it's a really great opportunity to learn from people and to be inspired. But again, there's a lot of information that you're unpacking there. So, you're going to these different sessions, you're choosing what you want to, what track you want to take and what you want to listen to. And I think the really undervalued part is just the connections that you're making and the people that you're talking to. So for me, when you walk away from that, you really do have to untangle it. It's a really good analogy because you have all of that information that it's in your head, it's in your notes, it's in the takeaways, and you have to really be deliberate about what you're going to act on, what you're going to apply, what you're going to take back to your team. And you can't do it all. So you really do have to untangle and get a game plan together with all of that information. So I think it's super relevant, but I do love the term inspiration because we all have so much going on, and to walk away and be inspired by people with different perspectives and different backgrounds and experiences, it really does kind of light a fire under you and motivate you going back into the workplace with how you can take that back.
I love it. That's a great response. And I brought you on, and pun intended here, strategically, because you do have a strategic plan in your head. You do think as a leader. And I think a lot of times, HR professionals are still trying to search for that strategic way of thinking. And let me ask, I mean, as an HR professional, as someone who leads, as someone who thinks strategically, speaking to the rest of the HR world, why is that such a struggle for a lot of HR professionals?
That's a great question. And if I were to reflect on that, I think it's because we're often asked to do so many tactical things to, keep the lights on, as they would say. So we have to take care of, making sure employees get paid, and we have benefit questions. We have people that need to go on leave of absence. So we're working through those day-to-day things that have to happen in the employee life cycle. And they're really important. They can't always be put aside. But we also need to show up in a way where we are thinking strategically and supporting our business, our leaders, and our employees in a way where we're changing that space. We're tying to the vision. We're making sure that we're understanding what those business needs are. Like if it's growth, if it's change, we have to be able to support that. So we have to think differently about the way we work. There's so much that has changed throughout the years. If we go back to personnel and what HR is seen as, a lot of people have that in their mind, right? They see HR as the person to call when they need a transaction done. So we need to show up in a different way, and we need to challenge ourselves. And sometimes that means saying no. Sometimes it means coming back and reflecting on how we're working and maybe taking ourselves out of work that feels really comfortable, but challenging ourselves in a different space where we show up in a different way and we're adding value. So we're getting called in on the front end with those business leaders to say, hey, I need to do something. I need to change something. This is our business strategy, instead of I'm calling HR as a reaction to something. So I think as leaders, if we can start inserting ourselves into those spaces where we're truly partnering. It's not just a phrase, but we're getting in those meetings. We're understanding the business. We're understanding the strategy and getting ahead of what's needed versus just reacting. I think that's where you start to shift. It's not easy. We don't always have the resources around us, depending on where we're at. But if we can change our mindset and the way we brand ourselves, I think that's where we allow that space to start at least thinking strategically and applying ourselves in that way.
I like that. And I'm going to dovetail into this next question, but I want to make a couple statements. I know from working with a lot of sales and sales leaders, that the word salesperson is kind of frowned upon. When I run an exercise quite a bit, I get pushy, sleazy, all these negative connotations when you're
Right.
asking about salespeople. I get the sense that there is maybe not some of those negative words, but when you bring up HR, a lot of negativity comes about from other leaders. So, based on what you just said, and understanding that it is something that HR leaders need to push towards, how do they connect better with C-suite? How do they do that in terms of that leadership and connecting with them?
It's funny that you say that, Greg, because the actual reason I went into HR is because I didn't like HR when I first started in my career. Like you said, the same thing. It had that negative feeling about it. And HR
Yeah.
came in when you got in trouble, when something bad was happening. Again, that reaction, you call HR in as a transaction.
Yes.
So, I think if you're going to connect at the C suite, all the way down to the front line, I think it's important to listen, sit back, understand, again, get in there and figure out what the business is to the point where you're trusted as a part of the team. If HR is separate, then they are coming in. It is a reaction. If they're part of your family and they're part of, your strategic planning meetings and everything that you're doing from the top to bottom, I think is really important because a lot of times we want that seat at the table. We want to be with the C-suite. That's the important space and, visibly that's where it looks great to be, but we also have to be all the way down to the front line where people know HR, they're not afraid of HR, and they see you coming in with the positive things too, and not just bringing in the cookies or the fun kind of little things, but they see that you're getting the barriers out of the way for them, that you're making their job easier, you're engaging them more in the work they're doing and helping them feel like they belong in the workplace. I think that's where you get the credibility at all levels. And when you can show the value, you're reducing turnover, you're increasing engagement, you're the voice of the employees, and you're giving that back to the C-suite. They'll see the value in you and start to build that trust with you, and that's really where you start making an impact as a partner. But I believe it really does have to be top to bottom. If you're just going in the C-suite meetings and you're just, hanging out with leadership, the employees see that as well, and then they don't trust you. So you really have to do work that top to bottom to get trust at all levels and have that brand be respected about you.
Now, how do they do that? Now, before you ask or before you give your answer, one of the things that I want to kind of give you some problems with is that doing that forces them to say yes. And in the HR suite, and with HR leaders, it's been my experience that they struggle to say no, even though here's the flip side, most employees and leaders think that that's where their decisions go to die, that HR just says no all the time. When in
Mhm.
reality, it's been my experience, it's quite the opposite. They say yes, they want to bring more, they get overwhelmed, they can't lead and think strategically because they have so many things that are going on. So, how do they do that as well as lead and think strategically, all bundled together?
Yeah, it's not easy, right? So it goes back to why it's difficult to be an HR professional. You're trying to do all of that. You need to say yes, you need to say no, and you need to build trust and you need to be visible everywhere. So it's really, really a difficult profession, but it can be done. I think saying no is part of the job, right? HR is here to protect you. We're here to challenge you. So if you have that trust in that space, I'm going to tell you when you're going to put the company in a bad position legally, or when you're going to do something that is going to impact the employees in a negative way, because I may have a perspective that you don't. But it's not just no, it's no, but let's try this. Or can we do something different? So again, you need to sell that to people because when people feel like they have a part of the decision making and they have input, they're going to buy in versus HR just saying yes or no to something. So again, just tying that back, if you're listening at all levels of the organization and making time for that, again, you're not being transactional in where you're listening and where you're inserting yourself, but it is strategic to be at all levels and choosing those places, those meetings, those events, those happy hours that you can get invited to listen to people and get that feedback. All of that ties back to where the C-suite will respect you for doing that. And that's where you can really pivot from, the no to the yes, but the no will always have to be there as part of HR. It's just no, but what can we do?
I
So
love it.
again, it's not easy because you're trying to do this top to bottom in a whole employee life cycle while keeping everything together, but it can be done and it can be done well in a way where you are respected, maybe not liked all the time by everybody, but they will respect, they will value, and I think if you really get to the place that all HR people want to be at, you're being asked for your opinion, right? Like, hey, I
Yeah,
need to do something. What are your thoughts on this? Let's talk through it. And again, I want you to challenge me. I want to be in that space where you can provide your perspective and expertise versus HR coming to police at the end. That's really where you start to partner and see that relationship flourish.
I love it. And for all those that are coming in here a little late, Jennifer DuPont, HR Director of Strategic Project and Plans with Kelly Services. One last question that I kind of want to tie it all together with. You've given all of us something to think about and some great ideas to be able to move forward. Now, for those listening and watching, if they had to prioritize one thing of all the things that you've given and all the things that they'll probably see coming up in October, what would it be and why?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the most important thing probably has nothing to do with HR, but know how your business works. Know how your company makes money. Know how your employees contribute to it. I think foundationally, you need to understand your business and all levels and how they input into that. I think that is a foundation for everything that you do. Because if you only come in with an HR lens of, okay, I need to go through comp planning, I need to go through career planning, I need to execute all of these cycles of HR work, and you don't have that perspective, you're never going to succeed. So get out there, get to know your employees, understand, the business again. How do you make money? How do you succeed? How do you show up in the market? I think that's the piece that a lot of HR professionals miss, and I think that's a big differentiator in the role and your value and how you're perceived with your brand as well.
I love it. And I'll just add, I think a lot of times people are really great at doing their position, their job within the boundaries of their department, but they don't see the bigger picture and what it means to the business or their organization. And I think you adding that step is a huge component. I hope that so many people listen to this, see it, grab onto it, run with it. If nothing else, take it one bite at a time. Because so many people, and I've seen it in HR and all businesses, they try to take on one huge responsibility instead of incrementally
Yep,
adding.
get those small wins. Yep, they add up.
Yeah, yeah. So Jennifer, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Again, Jennifer DuPont with Kelly Services, HR Director, Strategic Planning. Can't thank you enough for being here and
Thank
talking
you
a
for the
little
opportunity.
strategy. Thank
Can't
you
wait to see
so
you at
much.
MISHRM. Thanks,
Yeah,
Greg.
that sounds great. And in the meantime, thank you all for being a part of the MISHRM podcast. Again, I'm Greg Coyne. Thank you and look forward to seeing you here in October at the MISHRM conference. Take care, everybody.